Hey there, Marcus Hutzel here, and this is the FiFine K688 podcast microphone from FiFine Technology. It is a dynamic microphone with a cardioid pickup pattern geared towards podcasting and broadcast style usage like I'm using it here, and it has both USB connectivity for use directly with your computer as well as a standard analog XLR output so you can use it with any USB audio interface or any professional mixing console or even standalone audio recorders. And you can use both the digital USB output as well as the XLR output at the same time. It has dedicated gain and headphone knobs on the back of the mic as well as a 3.5mm headphone jack so you can hear yourself directly in real time using that headphone jack, as well as route your computer audio back to the headphone jack of the rear of the mic as well so you can hear all of your computer audio or maybe just your virtual meeting. The USB connectivity is via a USB-C port on the back of the mic, and it comes with a 2.5-meter USB-C to USB-A cable, but you can also use any USB-C to USB-C 2.0 cable that is compatible with audio transmission if you need or want a longer cable. It has a dedicated digital mute button directly on top of the mic, and when pressed, it mutes the USB digital audio going to your computer, but it also mutes the mic signal coming out of the headphone jack so you no longer hear yourself in your headphones when muted. This makes it very easy to mute and unmute yourself right on the mic and to know that you are actually muted during those important virtual meetings. If you hear yourself in your headphones, you're not muted. If you don't hear yourself in your headphones, you are muted as long as you're using the headphone jack on the back of the mic. It comes pre-installed in its own shock mount, and although not easily rotatable, you can remove the mic from its shock mount with these small rubber bands and rotate it for a different orientation or mounting position if you needed to. However, it is not exactly an easy process to remove the rubber bands, rotate the mic, and try to reinstall them, so I would definitely just try to hang it in the downward position as it comes if you can. The shock mount has a standard 5/8 threaded adapter for mounting directly to any standard microphone stand or microphone boom arm, but it does come with a 5/8 to 3/8 adapter if you needed to adapt it down to a smaller mount. And it has a removable, soft, medium gray foam windscreen. FiFine contacted me and asked me if they could send me this microphone for testing and review, and asked if it was possible for me to make a video. I said okay, on my own time, no money changed hands, but I do get to keep the microphone, and FiFine does not get to see this video or have any input prior to posting. So this microphone is very similar in design to both the Shure SM7B and its USB variant, the Shure MV7, both very popular and somewhat standard microphones for use in podcasts, interviews, and the like, and I think the K688 is certainly trying to compete with those microphones, but at a much lower price point of around $75. The Shure SM7B goes for about $400, and the MV7 is about $250. And for people that may just be starting out, those higher prices may be out of their budget and may just keep creators from creating. I think FiFine has many great sounding mics for very good prices, and that's been my experience with FiFine mics, and that's just my opinion, but every FiFine mic I've tried always sounds really good. I actually own 2 other ones which I've done videos about. So the big question you may have is, does this FiFine K688 really compete with either the Shure SM7B or the MV7 for something like a podcast or even this YouTube video as it's marketed to do? And can it produce the same sound quality? Well, I can't really tell you that because I do not own either of those other mics, and I've never really even used either one of them, but you're hearing the K688 right now, so I'll let you make up your own mind. But what I can tell you is that it's not always the tools that make a great product or piece of art. It's the craftsman or craftswoman. I've run very large, multi-million-dollar live and virtual conferences in my professional work where I've seen virtual presenters dialing in via Zoom to interact with the in-room talent in our conference while using a Shure MV7 or SM7B with a USB audio interface, but their audio was distorted as it was coming into the Zoom call. There was nothing that we could do on our end because that's just the audio that we received, which basically meant that despite their nice, expensive mic, the audio was distorted at their mic or at their preamp because they just didn't understand gain structure. So they were simply clipping out something on their end and had no idea it was happening nor any idea of how to fix it. So expensive tools don't always get you a perfect outcome if you don't know how to use them. You can give an inexperienced driver a Ferrari, but it's not the Ferrari doing the driving. I think the same goes for inexpensive microphones or any expensive gear. If the quality is good enough to where a piece of equipment has the ability to provide good outcomes, then a great craftsman or craftswoman can get that result from that gear. Also, if you're only using a microphone for a podcast or audio only recording and you won't be on camera and therefore nobody will see your microphone, then as long as it sounds good, does it matter? That's up to you, but there's no specific microphone that you have to use for a podcast or a video. Also keep in mind that not every microphone works well with every voice. If a $400 microphone doesn't work with the timbre or frequencies in your voice, but a $50 mic does and sounds better, use the $50 mic. So, does the K688 take the place of a more professional, industry and road-tested mic like the Shure SM7B? I can't say. If I were going to be transporting the mic around and letting different people handle and use it, I'd probably go for a more roadworthy, road-tested, and rugged mic like the Shure SM7B. But I probably won't use the mic much outside of my home studio. And if that situation sounds like how you may use the mic, then I would definitely consider this for only $75. So keep those things in mind as you continue to watch and listen to this video, and throughout the video you'll hear the unaltered sound of the FiFine K688. You'll mostly hear it via its USB connection as I record into Adobe Audition, but I will put on screen which version you're hearing because I'm also recording it via its XLR output through this other Scarlett 2i2 down here on the desk, recording into this laptop, while the USB connection goes into my other laptop, which is directly under that camera. Because I'm using Adobe Audition only allows one audio USB interface to be active at a time, so I had to use two computers, USB connection to that computer in Adobe Audition, and XLR output to Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 going into this computer, and I will put on screen when I switch back and forth between the USB output versus the analog output to the Scarlett 2i2. This mic has a very clean, fairly low noise output, both via USB and the analog XLR output. So there's not a lot of noise or hiss generated by the microphone itself. And oddly enough, I find that I actually hear a bit more noise or hiss when I use it via USB as opposed to when I use the XLR output and run the mic over to my Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 and use the XLR input and mic gain on the 2i2 and record that way. The noise difference is very minor. I'm probably splitting hairs, but I hear just a slight difference, a little bit more noise on the USB output. And here's a quick example. As I said, I'm recording both via USB into one computer and analog XLR output into the other computer. And I will play this section back and I'll be quiet at the end so you can hear the noise difference. And I will play this section back and I'll be quiet at the end so you can hear the noise difference. So again, it's minor. There may be a bit more noise when you run it via USB, but also depending on the preamp you use, the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 is a very quiet preamp, so it sounds really good there. Whereas if you use a less expensive and lower quality preamp or USB audio interface, you actually make it more noise that way. So do your own testing, but those are my results. If we take off the foam windscreen, we can see that the K688 has this protective cage or grill, and the actual diaphragm of the microphone is set back about 3/4 of an inch behind this grill. This keeps the diaphragm further away from your voice, so it limits the accentuated low end that you can get with a proximity effect when you get really close to a cardioid pattern microphone. It also means that that cage then acts as a pseudo pop filter, so it keeps your breath from hitting the diaphragm of the mic as hard and keeps you from distorting the mic as much. This is very similar in design to the Shure SM7B, but it looks like the Shure SM7B's mic element is set quite a bit further back inside that inner grill, and that means the K688 isn't going to handle hard plosives from your breath as well as something like the SM7B, so I would recommend either adding an additional pop filter like this in front of the K688 if you plan to use it really close, or just place the mic a bit off axis or to the side so your breath and voice kind of pass by the front of the mic instead of hitting it directly. So if we do some plosives into this mic, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. I'm not distorting any of my inputs or any of my preamps, but you can kind of hear those plosives a little bit on the diaphragm of the mic despite the fact that it's not distorting it, so you have to be careful of that. Also, this mic does pick up a lot more handling noise from even the cables attached to the back, so if I just touch these cables, that will get picked up by the mic and make it go into your meeting or recording. This microphone boom arm helps isolate the mic a bit more from my desk so you don't get as many banging noises from me bouncing around and banging on my desk, but adjusting the knobs on the back of the mic during a meeting or recording may be heard in your audio. But if you get your cables secured and your levels set, then you may not need to make any adjustments during your meetings or recordings, but I would limit how much you touch the mic or cables or even the shock mount while using the mic, or else you'll hear that a little bit. So just prepare yourself, get yourself set up, and you can still get really great sound out of this mic. Overall, I'm very pleased with the sound of the K688. It's a full sound for the most part. I do find it's a bit harsh here and there on my voice in the sibilant ranges, those upper frequencies of the upper mid-range, but my voice tends to do that on a lot of mics, so it may be just something to listen and look out for. If I were going to use this in editing, I would probably add a de-esser in post. I have not done that in this video because I wanted you to hear the raw audio coming from the microphone, but it has a lot of functionality and it's budget friendly. But definitely keep in mind how much you may need or want to handle the mic while recording and how close you'll be to it so you can not only limit the handling noise, but also limit the plosives that you may introduce to your audio. So that's the basic overview of this mic, and hopefully at this point enough sound samples. And if you want to stick around, I'm going to go through all of the other features as quick as I can. On top of the mic is that digital mute button, which is touch sensitive. There are those two knobs on the back of the mic, one for mic gain, which sets the level of the microphone that goes into the computer, and one for headphone volume. The mic gain knob is on bottom, and the headphone knob is on top. Since the knobs are on the back and you can't always see them to make adjustments, I found a good way to remember which knob is on top and which one is on bottom is that our headphones are above our mouth, and that's the same way the knobs are oriented. If you don't have a microphone boom arm and are unable to hang it in the downward position like this and wanted to mount it on a small desk stand, you can do that. That would put the knobs upside down unless you did remove those small rubber bands and rotated the mic within its own shock mount to get the knobs back in their kind of vertical orientation. Next to those knobs on the back of the mic is the analog XLR output, the 3.5mm headphone output, and the USB-C connection. When connected via USB, the microphone gets a bit of power from the computer that powers the headphone jack and the LED light for the mute button. The mute button, as I said, is touch sensitive, so just a quick touch and you can mute the mic. Check, 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 1, 2, and I'm going to bring in the audio from my backup microphone here because, as you can see, the mute button there is red and there's no audio coming from that, so just another quick touch and now we are back to being unmuted. The mute button will be red when you're muted and green when you're live and unmuted, and you can see that right here on top of the mic. And as I said, the mute button mutes the mic completely over to your computer, and it mutes the mic going to the headphone jack, so you'll be able to hear whether you've muted yourself or not in your headphones as long as you use the headphone jack on the mic itself. I really like the inclusion of a mute button on the mic. It's a really great way to confirm that you're muted during those virtual meetings instead of having to look for a mute button in Zoom or your other meeting software. You just touch to mute and touch again to unmute, and again, you get that audible feedback in your headphones. But that mute button does not affect the analog XLR output. I'll come back to this in just a second. With that mute button, I do find that you have to be careful with it. Not because it doesn't work, it works quite well, but you have to be careful with how you grab the microphone if you want to move the microphone around. When I first mounted the microphone and then needed to reposition it, my instinct was just to grab the mic like this. But you can see there, I just muted the microphone because my hand wants to grab the microphone like this to have a more secure connection. So you have to be careful with how you grab the mic. It's better to grab the mic arm or grab the shock mount to move it around instead of grabbing it like this. It's a bit of a quirk, but again, with that feedback, you'll know immediately whether you've muted yourself or not. Now, you don't have to use this microphone as a USB mic. You never have to plug it in via USB. You can leave the USB cable unplugged and just use the XLR output and run the cable to another audio interface or audio device with an XLR mic preamp. But when you are not plugged in via USB and when you're only plugged in using an XLR cable, none of the smart features of the microphone work. It just becomes like any other standard XLR microphone. So the gain knob, the headphone knob, and the mute button just have no functionality if there's no USB cable running to a USB port on a computer, which means you can't use the headphone jack on the mic and you can't use the gain knob or anything else or even the mute button on the mic. So you won't be able to directly monitor yourself with the mic itself, you would have to monitor through another device. So you could use something like the Scarlett 2i2 and use the direct monitor feature on the Scarlett to monitor yourself that way. And again, using both USB and analog XLR output doesn't reduce any functionality. When you're using both, you just get the smart features of the mic to work. But again, remember that mute button has no effect on the analog output. So you could use the USB function for your virtual meeting and be able to mute yourself here while still always having that analog XLR output to maybe run to something like a field recorder, or again, like another USB audio interface and recording on another computer like I'm doing here. So with any USB microphone or any microphone going into a preamp, your input gain is the most important thing to ensure clean and undistorted sound. And you've got a couple of different places to check that with some USB mics and with the K688. So if we go over here to System Preferences in my Mac computer, Sound, we can go to the Input tab here, and I've selected FiFine K688 microphone. Now you can see here you do get an input slider. And if you turn this down, you will see the corresponding level there on the meters go down, and you'll hear my voice go down as well. Now that's one place to check it. The other place obviously is on the microphone itself. And here's the difference between the two and how you need to use both of them to get not only good input into your computer, but also in your headphones. The gain knob on the mic will affect how much of your own voice you hear in your headphones. So I actually have the gain knob on the microphone all the way up. And if that's too much for my computer, we can look here in Adobe Audition. Currently, it's not too much for my computer, so I can have both of these all the way up. But if it were, for some reason, if I were just too loud, I could turn that down and send less into my computer, but my own voice doesn't go away in my headphones. If I needed the converse of that, if it were too loud in my headphones from my own ears, I could use the headphone knob, obviously, or I could turn down the gain knob on the microphone and then turn up the slider here in System Preferences to send more level into my computer. You've got to always watch your input meters on your software to make sure you're not clipping out the software, because if you clip out there, you're going to have distorted audio to all your meeting attendees and to your recording. So you've got to balance both the input gain on the microphone versus the input gain on your computer and make fine adjustments. And the most important thing I can tell you is to never limit your input gain to compensate for volume in your headphones. You need to use headphone jacks, control knobs, and master outputs from your computer to do that. So never sacrifice good, strong, proper input gain for output volume in your ears. And that's about it. I think this mic sounds great. It has some really great features. I really like having a mute button on the mic. I think for budget-conscious people looking to get started in their home studios, doing videos like this one or podcasts or other content can get really great results out of this mic. And you can use it with your computer via USB, so you can take it with you on the road, or you can use it with any other XLR input on any USB audio interface, professional mixer, or audio recorder. And with that lower price point of about $75, it won't always break the bank. So remember, it's not the tools that make a great product, it's the artist. So until next time, this has been the FiFine K688, and yes, it is pronounced FiFine because the representative that contacted me spelled it out for me in an email. So FiFine it is, and FiFine it sounds. Later.